the IEPs, but I've seen teachers not look at the accommodations on the IEP and they'll say, oh, I was supposed to do that? Yes, it's actually under the law that you need to do it. It's not a matter of procedure. Students with an IEP need to be placed in the least restricted environment. This means, in theory, unless someone has a severe cognitive exceptionality, that they're going to be in a mainstream classroom regardless of what needs are. And individuals that take the Florida State assessment will be placed in a mainstream environment, barring behavioral issues, and this is very few and far between. Example, in my school, less than 1% of the students are in an EBD unit, an emotionally behaviorally disabled unit, so it's very small. Classes, because of this, will become more diverse in nature. You have people with many different needs in one class. Curriculum is reflecting the reality of inclusion. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. This is also dependent upon the teacher. And students are being held to a higher level. That's one of the things, especially in the state, when we're looking at Common Core. And one of the difficulties for our students with autism is being able to answer questions that are abstract, being able to locate information, being able to answer contextual questions. And that creates a lot of difficulties. And the parental concerns about inclusion are very important because until recently past, a significant portion of students with high-functioning autism were not placed in a mainstream environment. In my own situation, it was only the past 5 years that it switched over. When I started teaching students with autism, they were in more of a contained environment, the exception of kids that were at the very highest of the high levels. And what parents also want to know is, what level of support will they get? And several people brought this up. One teacher will be fantastic, another teacher will not be. And people want their children to succeed in this environment, not just be there for the sake of being there. Will they truly be integrated into the environment of the classroom? This is another thing. In some classes, I'll say it's fantastic, in other classes, it isn't. I had a student last year that the teacher let him do whatever he wanted to do in regards so he would not disrupt the class, which is the wrong thing. You know what? He's there to learn, not to do his preferable activities. And that's changing that young man and his academic future. How will teachers apply differentiation of instruction to meet their needs? A friend of mine who teaches gifted will look at students in her class that if they have autism, if they have a language difficulty, if they have learning differences, and will adapt it to that. There will be a high level because it's in a gifted class, but she looks at what their needs are. She helps these kids get organized. Because the more demanding it is, the more organized and the more on your feet you need to be. But not every teacher is like this. Some teachers will say, you know what, he's in a gifted class, he needs to do what's expected of him, and that's not meeting the guidelines of an IEP or what inclusion is about. Will teachers follow accommodations in the IEP? People in this audience, I'm sure, will tell me that some will, some won't. Who here has had trouble with a teacher falling in a mainstream environment? What situation did you have?
There was a math teacher, and he was putting all the students that were with an IEP. That was my first problem. The second problem was he was getting grades. He would just give them a seat, sit back there, like I said, sit back and be quiet. They were not learning. They had a great level movement. He was like, oh, that's what an accommodation is, because we started
that's one of the things that I feel, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, basically all of what you're saying, that teachers in a mainstream environment need to be schooled in what accommodations are, and that accommodations are legally binding. It's not just there for us to put it there, there for us to pester people in a mainstream environment. It's there to enhance the learning environment for these young people, and if it's not being done, they're not getting what they need to be getting. And how will the student be received in the mainstream environment? Like you're saying, grouping them all together, even at an early age, students know who's different. I can tell you from my own experience, even though I was in a regular ed class, people knew. And when you put everybody together, what you're doing in a sense is creating a stigma for those young people. You're going to affect their self-esteem, and it's unfairly stacking the deck against these young people. If there's preferential seating, you give that child a seat in front of the class. If they cannot be in a certain area because of a draft or because of lighting, you put them in another area, or you turn one of the light switches off. It's not that hard. I do that for myself when I teach my students, and none of them complain. They know it already. Mr. Miller doesn't like a lot of light. That's it. Not hard to do. And what will be done to prevent potential bullying? This is very important, because our young people can't read certain social cues or contexts. It's very likely that they'll be bullied at some time in their academic career. I can tell you, when I was in elementary school, I was bullied almost every day. I kept it from my parents, but my parents realized it because I wasn't very good at hiding it. And there was very little done at the school time. One of the things that I feel when you're integrating students with exceptionalities within a mainstream environment, you need to have a zero tolerance towards bullying. There needs to be concrete consequences for bullying. If you want someone to be able to learn, you want someone to feel at home in an environment, if you don't do this, it's not going to happen. You're not going to have success. You're going to have children that will potentially act out. And what conditions will be created to help foster an environment of academic success? I had one teacher last year that was incredible in the classes I was facilitating. He was a new teacher, and what he did was he went beyond the accommodations. If they needed extra help, they could come to him during his planning period. They could come during lunch. That he was flexible with homework assignments. He looked at what their difficulties were and treated them as any other student in the class, but with special needs, treating them with dignity and integrity, and that's what it's about. The parental role is very important, that the parent needs to advocate for a child's needs during an IEP. If you feel it's not being met, speak up. That I have plenty of parents that will say, oh, but I don't want to be confrontational. You know what? It's your child. Their needs need to be met. If it's a realistic demand, you ask for it. If they are not getting extra time for an assignment and they have executive functioning issues, you get it. It's not going to hurt anyone if the child has a day or two extra on an assignment. So it could be done and done properly. They need to foster an attitude of accountability and responsibility.
I have kind of one of the roadblocks that I've met when interacting with regular ed teachers is that when you bring up things, you know, some of the reasonable accommodations you're talking about, flexible responding, a little extra time, that sort of thing, is they say, well, I can't do that because if I give it to this kid over here, I'm going to have 22 other kids that are demanding it, and then their parents will start demanding it. What's kind of your response when you
Okay, my response will be, if this is not remedied, I'll be polite, but this will be the end result. If this is not remedied, this is a legal document. These parents, especially the ones that are very involved with a child's education, will speak to the Office of Students with Exceptionalities Department within their county and go above their heads, and that you do not want a problem to begin that does not need to begin. Because we're dealing with students with specific needs. We're not dealing with regular ed students with those needs. And anyways, if you have a teacher that's worth their salt in a mainstream class, they're going to look after those accommodations, but also with students that are slower learners that do not have an exceptionality, they're going to create accommodations within that class for those students to be able to get them to absorb and assimilate the knowledge in a more effective way. If they're not doing that, they're not doing their job. I'm sorry that I come across it as a very impassioned, but that's how I feel. That I'm going into a class to make a difference in a student's life, to get them as far as they're going to go. I didn't just help my students when I went into a classroom. I helped all the students when I was in a classroom. I did not discriminate between mine and others, and that's how I'd answer the question. And they need to help their children become organized and stay so. One of the things that I say is, several times a week, organize their folders, get papers into the proper part of the folders, clean out the backpacks. But parents should not do this themselves, because ultimately it's the responsibility of the child. If you do it, you're enabling a trend that they're going to get used to it. Oh, you know what? Mom or dad's going to do it. And when the time comes when you aren't going to do it, then you're going to have a problem. Like the example I told you of me having my mother type my papers when I was younger, I got a nice little reality check, and you know what? That was the best thing that could have happened to me, because I had to be responsible for it, nobody else. They need to regularly communicate with teachers. This could be by phone call, by email, and I feel it's very, very important. I make it my business to talk to parents. When I was at my former school, I talked to more than half my parents weekly, face-to-face, when they picked up their children. And I dealt with anything that I needed to deal with in a quick manner. And I made it my point to be friendly with them, and the parents were involved, and I made sure that the parents were involved in their children's education. It's very important. Make sure their needs are being met. Example of this is, to be very honest, I suspect my daughter may be on the spectrum. My daughter is very gifted. Her needs are not being met. What did my wife do this morning? Emailed the teacher and is asking for more of an enriched curriculum for homework. We're not expecting different in the class, but we want something that will meet her needs. And we're asking for it in a nice way, but we're asking for it. We're not just sitting and forgetting about it. And be their biggest cheerleaders. Children, when you're in a mainstream environment with autism, are their own harshest critics. Oh, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this. Show them they can do this. Point out the positives. When you look at setbacks, look at it realistically. So what? You know what? You didn't get the grade you exactly wanted. We'll try better next time. We'll look at it another way. Look at it positively. And to create an environment at home that will bolster academic success with homework and priorities. That homework needs to be done. No one likes homework. Maybe I was about the only child that did when I was older, but I was an odd egg. And to speak with their child and maintain an open line of communication. You need to get the child to let the parent know what's